This episode is brought to you by TriStar Trust Bank.
I found myself really distracted and I wasn't working. So then I had to challenge myself to get to kickstart back to working. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do a painting a day.
Welcome to the Saginaw Art Museum podcast. COVID-19 pandemic is altering the usual routines of people around the globe and around the block. As practices of social distancing and self-quarantine are implemented, artists are finding new ways to adapt to the changing landscape. In this series, Art at Home, we have conversation with artists and creative-minded individuals to understand the way these unusual times are impacting lives. By painting a new piece every day, Hannah Layden worked in a home studio in New York City throughout the COVID-19 crisis. This disciplined approach helped her cope with the overwhelming amounts of information being presented on a daily basis during the crisis. Listen to learn more about Layden's work. This interview was recorded June 16, 2020. So today on the podcast, I have Hannah Layden, and we are talking to her from her home studio. Welcome to the podcast, Hannah.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is great.
So, Hannah, for our listeners at home, tell us a little bit about the artwork that you do.
Yeah, so right now I'm doing acrylic paintings, and what the work is about is my kind of understanding and exploration of what it means to not only be a woman, but a woman with a physical disability. I have a physical disability, and two of my sisters have the same disability. It's multiple Tigerian syndrome. It's the Escobar variant, and it's under the umbrella of muscular dystrophy. If you're familiar with that. So my work kind of that's a kind of a jumping off point from that. Like I use our experiences and so it's how my femininity is tied to my disability, more or less.
And the works that you had posted on your website, at least, those look like they're relatively large pieces. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah. So I think the three most recent they're fairly big, like 30 by 40. I love working big, but when I started, I kind of shifted the way I'm working, like starting in January. And so I started really small, like 4 by 6. And then once I kind of got comfortable in finding a new way to work, then I jumped to these larger canvases.
So during this sort of time, we're starting to have some of the restrictions lifted in terms of being able to get out more and go about. But I'm curious about how you have been spending the time sort of in your studio during this COVID-19 pandemic. What have you discovered in terms of the way you work? Has it changed, or is it similar to the way that you were working before?
I feel like it changed a lot just because the access to my studio didn't change because I work from home, and I'm fortunate that I was able to have access to my studio. But I feel like the mindset and the energy behind the work changed because COVID's so scary and strange. So I found myself when I first went into quarantine, I realized that like the first week or so, like I wasn't working because I was so distracted, and especially since like my studio window looks onto a hospital. So when I looked outside, I would only see healthcare workers, which, I mean, you kind of gain perspective and develop a lot of respect for what they're doing and like respect for yourself, stay in to make what they're doing worth it. But I found myself really distracted and I wasn't working. So then I had to challenge myself to get to kickstart back to working. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna do a painting a day, so that like I had to get in my studio and work. So then I did. So each day, like for like 15 or 20, I did a small painting a day. So that kind of changed the way I worked. I kind of had to, because I was in such a new and strange place.
Yeah, that it sounds like you were able to fairly quickly then develop a level of discipline in the structure of your creativity then.
I mean, yeah, I didn't know how else to like kind of get back in or refocus. So I just thought if I kind of put more structure in place, then maybe that would help.
So you moved from some of those small ones, and then you started back into making larger pieces.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was kind of before these like larger abstracted works, I was working mostly with the figure, and I would do one figure like on a white page, and they didn't have like a setting or a space. So these past couple months, I've been trying to put them in a space. So, and like give them a setting and give them a place to live. And so this kind of like painting a day thing really helped me like move through the work and move through ideas and kind of find a comfortable way of working. And it kind of helped me loosen up a bit too, which is good.
Yeah, I mean, looking at your paintings, I certainly see that space a little bit more. It's almost as though you have something of a surreal landscapes that you're putting these figures in. Do you feel like that has changed at all, or do you feel like that's improved since you've been having this regular time of making art?
I think I would, yeah, I would say it's improved. I initially, I, I had a hard time finding where I wanted them to live. Um, and I almost thought about it as if like, these figures I make that are kind of, they're considered other, they're outcast in their society. They finally found a place to live and exist in their own world. And, and so I kept, every time I would paint something, it would look too much like our world. And I wanted it more like kind of sci-fi surreal, like you said, because I think if like our world was totally accessible and like tolerant and without prejudice, like it would look nothing like the world we're in now. So that's why it's kind of, they live in this like abstract world. It's peaceful and like it's only meant for them.
Yeah, there's a almost science fiction like element to um, the large parts of color in your pieces. That was sort of what came to mind initially when I saw them, was sort of this large amount of color, but also some of the curve and the lines and things like that.
Yeah. And I like kind of experimenting with the color, like the neons and the like putting um, different colors next to each other so that they'll on a uncomfortable pairing or maybe they work together. So color's been um, a big thing right now with the paintings.
Where are you drawing some of your inspiration from for the paintings that you're doing right now? Do you think that that inspiration is the same or different, having been in quarantine?
I think it's probably, well, it's the same uh, interest in like, or I'm pulling from like these figures are, like my history with, my disability and that. But I think, I mean, probably subconsciously they're changing because of like like how wild the world outside is, I guess. And like all that's happening. You can't help but like have that infiltrate the work.
Yeah, and so that the news, even though you're working in your studio, the sort of outside environment is still part of what brings some of that the painting together.
Yeah, and I don't see how it couldn't, even if you were, I mean, I guess if you were kind of holed up without the news, but everyone's still quarantined. So it's bound to just kind of find its way into everyone's work, I think.
Do you feel like you could identify something that has been really rewarding out of this experience that perhaps might not have happened otherwise? Do you feel like there's any elements of that involved in your time?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the where I where the work is now, I guess would be rewarding, and I was able to kind of, because of the painting a day, I was able to kind of fast forward a lot of like progress and like hiccups I would have had, just because when you're painting, like completing a painting a day, you're constantly kind of working through things. So I guess that would be a reward. And I feel like I've just loosened up a lot. I also uh, was going to mention when I, like a few weeks into quarantine, all of a sudden it's like a light switch where like I couldn't really see, like like I couldn't look at, like the light outside was too bright. Like I couldn't look at my phone, and then like the neon colors I was using, I couldn't, I just couldn't look at it. So I had to like do this whole thing with flushing my eye, and I had to start using these drops that are like, it's almost like a lighter version of a gel. So then when you put it in your eye, it's like, it almost takes like 10 minutes to blink it out. And so I was using these in my studio, and I didn't want that to stop my, like, I didn't want to like put a drop in, wait 10 minutes, then continue to paint. So I painted through, the kind of blur that these drops had caused. And I think that helped me kind of be less insecure about the marks that I was making. And like I said, like loosen up, which it was unfortunate that like that happened, because it was like scary. But then I think the outcome was almost positive, because I was just, I had less inhibitions. I just kind of listened to my body and like made a stroke, versus like being so insecure about the decisions I was making. There was less thinking and more doing. So I think that, combined with the painting a day, has really like pushed the work forward.
Yeah, it's almost been an accelerator of sorts
Yeah.
from what I hear you describing.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Sort of moving away from your artwork just for a minute, you also work with an apparel company. Is it pronounced Billy? Billy?
Billy. Yeah.
Billy.
Love
Okay,
Billy.
Billy. Um, how has that been impacted during the pandemic? Well, I guess start by telling us a little bit about it.
Oh yeah. So it's a apparel company me and one of my other sisters owns, and it promotes disability um and empowerment through, like, we take designs that are kind of often seen as like medical, and then we just kind of promote them and like to like, yeah, and like empower them. And we had come out with a new design, and we were going to get it kind of print it and debut it, but because of quarantine that kind of halted that. So we just kind of put that on hold until we could get them made. And so now we're finally getting them made now, and we're going to debut them soon.
Yeah, so that sounds like on that end of things, with the apparel company, that's held up, but it's still sort of more delayed than canceled altogether, huh?
Oh yeah, it was definitely delayed. It wasn't canceled by any means. It just kind of like halted the progress, I
Mm.
guess, a bit.
How do you see sort of the work that you're doing in the studio, maybe translating into, and the lessons that you've learned working in the studio the last couple months, translating into the work with your apparel company? Do you see that any bridge there between sort of the process or the work itself?
Like a connection between the two.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my sister does more of the business side, so I design them.
Hmm.
I guess the designs, I guess, do kind of have a similar, like, I don't know. There's a kind of a movement too. I feel like is similar to the brushstrokes I make, if I had to say it, but I guess it's more graphic design. But yeah, I mean, obviously it's coming from the same place. I never thought about that before. That's
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time. Sort of in closing, I'd love to hear some of the things that you're most looking forward to once we start moving out of quarantine. And obviously, things are not going to be the same, but certainly a bit of reemergence is happening now. I'd love to hear
Hmm.
sort of what you're looking forward to.
Uh, Mostly, I think uh, what I miss is going to galleries and museums. So I think that's one of the things that I tried to go, because I live close proximity to the Met, so I tried to go there once a week. So I think that's kind of, if I had to pick one thing, I mean, also just kind of going outside, going to dinner. But yeah, I think the museum thing I'm most looking forward to.
Yeah. It's been difficult for us to have our collection and not be able to share it and not have people in. So, on the reverse side.
Are you open yet?
Not yet. We are working on a reopen plan now. And we hope to be open in the near future. But so far,
exciting.
We're not there yet. Well, Hannah, thank you so much for joining us today, and all the best to you, both with your own art and the apparel company. I will leave some links in the description of the podcast to both your art and the company. But I really appreciate having you on, learning more about sort of the process that you've been going through here.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is great. I appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to the Saginaw Art Museum podcast. You can stay connected with the museum through our website and social media channels. We invite you to become a subscriber of this podcast or become a monthly contributor to the show to help us carry out our mission of providing art for all.